Hey everybody, welcome back to Viive Values. Here we are, season 2, episode 2, and I'm so excited about this one. I'm gonna get her on here so that then I can share the excitement with all of you. So let's get our girl Maria on here and we will share. Awesome. I hope everyone's keeping warm. I have my big long white sweater on. I feel like the furnace needs to kick in and just get us going into fall here in Canada. Alrighty, let's see. Pretty soon. Um, Everyone oh wait, here she is.
Oh,
Maria. There you are. Hey girl.
can you hear me okay? I hope you can hear me okay.
Not bad. You need to speak up a little bit louder.
I can talk as loud as you need me to.
There, that's really good. I was just saying how excited I am that you're here, although all my guests are exciting. But it's exciting because we kind of have a communication history. We've done this before. This is not our first time chatting together. And
Yeah.
this is our third. We also just met for the first time in person, which was
I
ridiculous
know.
considering how long we'd been connected, that we finally got to do that. That's what happens when you launch companies in COVID, right? You go years without meeting people.
I know. It's been what, 3 or 4 years and actually finally meeting each other in person. What was it, 2 weeks ago? I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
you're not just a floating head on the screen. It's
I
great.
know. I know. So let me tell everyone a little bit about you, all right? And your
Go for it.
awesomeness. Okay.
Yes.
Everyone, I'm going to say this right. You ready? This is Maria Vassiliou. Maybe. Pretty
Very
close.
good.
There we go. Okay. She's an entrepreneur dedicated to revolutionizing the conversations that we're having around death and grief. And you all know that I love to talk. So that's why her and I get along so well. She's become a trusted practitioner and advocate through her personal experiences, which we will touch on, and over a decade of experience in this field. Through her internationally recognized podcast, I didn't know it was international, that's pretty cool, and media, she provides an edutainment style, that's the first time I knew that word, heard that word, edutainment style content that dives into how we collectively view and discuss death and grief. And her podcast, which I have been lucky enough to be a guest on not once, but twice, Philotimo Life, is dedicated to breathing life into conversations around death and grief. And it's focused on transforming how we approach life transitions and breaking the silence around those often taboo subtopics. So everyone, this is Maria. Maria, say hey.
Hello. Nailed the pronunciation of my
Oh,
last name, Philotimo. My last name has way too many vowels
yeah.
sometimes, and I'm like, how is it even a Greek name? What is happening? You nailed it. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I'm so glad that you're here and that now I get to share you with my platform, just like you've given me the chance to speak with your audience twice now. So, why don't you start by telling everyone here why you created this incredible podcast, Philotimo Life?
Absolutely. My origin story started when I was a kid. Mom died when I was 2 years old. And growing up, in hindsight, I'm realizing, oh, some of the situations I had to navigate weren't the greatest. And in the moment, it was totally fine. I did what I did as a kid, just lived life. And when I hit my early 20s, I started to recognize, oh, there's a lot of gaps in a lot of systems that people are placed in.
Mhm.
And following that, dabbled in death and grief in that whole space for a little bit, just on my own, in my own way.
Mhm.
And then COVID happened, lockdowns, everything happened, everything was taking place, and a lot of it was really mismanaged. And I remember thinking in this moment, there's going to be so much grief taking place in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And especially, we've spoken about this, the number of baby boomers, the number of Gen Xers that are going to be having to navigate, manage, deal with all of these things over the next few years also, it's going to be kind of like a double whammy.
Yeah.
And I started to look into resources around death, dying, and grief because I was interested. I wanted to learn how to better navigate these conversations for myself, for my family, for my loved ones, for my friends. And everything I found, the way I described it was very much vanilla scented candles, cookie cutter, very gray background. And I was interested in the space, and I can only imagine who someone wasn't interested in the space. I was like, I don't want to read this. I don't want to look at this.
Yeah.
So I launched Philotimo Life with the vibrant colors, very much lots of pink. This is very much the pink
Yeah.
of our brand.
Yeah.
And just have the conversation. It doesn't have to be, it is scary,
Mm-hmm.
and also it can be very nurturing and comforting, and you can like have your hand held throughout the entire process.
Mm-hmm.
So just really making sure that the conversation can still be energizing and breathing life into
Mm-hmm.
it. So
That's so great. And I mean, you and I don't even remember how we initially got connected because it was so long ago. But I vividly remember recording your podcast because I felt going into the space I was going in very alone in my generation. Like I didn't feel like there was anyone my age just kicking around talking about getting old and dying.
yeah.
And that is a very alienating thing to feel, also considering the topic itself, like we're trying to breathe life into something, but then you feel alone at the same time. And it was so wonderful to meet you and to see that you took something that was obviously very life defining and potentially traumatic at the time, right, losing your mother so young, and you've been able to now, like decades later, turn it into this incredible movement and this positivity. I just think it's so cool. I just love you.
Likewise, love you too.
So, so I mean, Philotimo Life and Vive were really cut from the same cloth. You know, we both started our businesses because we feel like these crucial conversations around aging and end of life for me, and then end of life and after death for you, and grief, that they're just not happening. So, why do you
Mm.
think people? I'm curious your opinion, and I'm wondering if we're really similar on this. But why do you think people are so hesitant to talk about death and grief?
You it's such an interesting question because I was at Evergreen last year for their Good Mornings
Yeah.
festival, and I'm returning this year as well. And one of the activations I had last year were boards where people could answer questions.
Okay.
And one of the questions, I want two questions. One of the questions was, how comfortable are you talking about death and dying and grief?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, the majority of people put stickies on saying like, yes, very comfortable. And then the second question one of the other boards had was, how often do you talk about this? And the majority of people said, not at all, or very infrequently.
So of course they're comfortable with it. They're avoiding it
Yeah,
entirely.
they're just avoiding it entirely. And it's funny because there's also a statistic that says one third of people actually avoid this conversation
Mm-hmm.
because they're worried about how the other person is going to
Yeah.
feel. They don't want to make the other person uncomfortable. And so it feels as if there's this idea that if you talk about it, you're going to be a Debbie Downer. If you talk about it, you're going to encourage it to happen.
Yeah.
And I often joke, I'm like, if we don't talk about death, does that mean I'll live forever? I didn't know this like life hack that I
Not.
was unaware about. So there's that there's that idea of I'm going to make other people uncomfortable about it. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one. And then the second idea is this death
Yeah.
anxiety. People are struggling to pay bills. People are trying to figure out their living situations. They have children, they have parents that they're having to support and navigate and manage and all of that. And people don't have time to think about the idea that there's going to be a day where I no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of I'm not going to exist at some point, whether it's tomorrow, 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, that's a lot for some
Yeah.
people. And we are not allotted the time and the space to actually think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a daunting thought for a lot of folks. So death anxiety, terror management theory, for folks listening and hearing this, like definitely look into that. We're just not allotted the time to process that reality.
Yeah. No, there isn't time in general. I mean, I think
Yeah.
with each generation, we are just more and more obsessed with doing all the things all the time, being so important to the people in our lives. And I know that when I speak to mothers in my generation, I'm an older millennial, they struggle with the idea of, because statistically speaking, if I'm in a room with myself and three of my girlfriends, one of us is going to get breast cancer. 1.5 of us, I believe, is going to get Alzheimer's. Like it's not great. It's not great odds out there,
Right.
right? So, and one of us will probably die young, like under the age of 50, which means our kids are going to feel that when they're kids, right? Not necessarily when they're adults. Not that it's better or worse, just different. And I'm like, that's even more the reason that we need to have conversations about this, just even from the logistical standpoint of what the heck's going to happen when you do die, to your children, to your family, things like that. But then also we have this opportunity, as as these, young adult generations, because there's multiple generations in that bracket right now, to educate the next generation, the people who were kids, about this comfort level that they could have. I mean, we say be comfortable with death. That's never going to be the thing. I'm not comfortable thinking about dying. I accept it, which I think is different,
Yes.
because there's a lot of people that just don't accept it. Like they're just full blown denial at the idea of it. And I know that when I think about it, when I think about dying young, I I've learned enough now not to be scared about dying from the perspective of pain, because I've just learned what our medical system has the ability to do. But
Yeah.
when I think about missing out, like total FOMO, that's a big thing for me. And I think that's what most people are hung up on, is like missing out on all the things they didn't get to do. And this is where you hear people talking about regrets on their deathbed and whatnot. And if only people could realize that if you accept the fact that your life will end one day, whenever that is, it actually really starts to change the way you live your life right
Yeah.
now.
Absolutely. And if I can even share a story, I remember I was at a uh, death end of life conference earlier in the year, and I was just standing, observing,
Mm-hmm.
like seeing who I wanted to talk to next. And someone was there, and they were older, and they looked at me. We started to have a conversation, and they literally asked me, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Because I'm going to die." And the response was, "But you're so young. Why are you here?" And I said, "Because I'm going to
Yeah.
die." And it was this, I
Wow.
think they had a light bulb moment of like, oh, right, it's not just a conversation for people who are over 50.
Yeah,
It needs to be a conversation for everybody. Like everyone's going to be touched by this at some point.
exactly.
It's not for a certain group. It's everyone.
Exactly. 100%. Now, in your work, you've done what I know we really try to do at Viive, and you're taking a very lighthearted approach. As you said, with your pinks, we rock a pink at Viive as well. Like, let's breathe some life into this. And you actually have a podcast episode about death in video games, an episode about how and why death is personified, an episode about dark humor, and just so much more, where you're just sort of showing us how, like, we're surrounded by death without just like the actual act of finding out someone
Yes.
died. We are surrounded by media and hints of death everywhere in our life all the time. I
Yes.
mean, we could jump into the Halloween conversation another day, but like seriously, it's everywhere, right? So why did you decide to put such a positive spin on a topic that many people can only see as morbid and maybe, quite frankly, a little bit depressing? And what do you think the value is in what you've done?
It's a really good question, and I don't necessarily view it as a positive spin. I
Okay.
view it almost as this is reality.
Yes.
Grief is
Mm-hmm.
messy, grief is sad, grief is
Yeah.
funny. Like you're making a casserole and you're remembering when it like fell onto somebody's like pants and it was making a mess and like you just
Yeah.
start to cry in your casserole bowl, whatever you're making.
Yeah.
Like there are funny moments in grief.
Mm-hmm.
There's sadness, not taking away from the like gut wrenching feeling that takes place when grief happens.
Yeah.
It's just the reality of it and highlighting the fact that it is in so many places. Anyone listening right now, the next time you watch your favorite TV show, you play your next video game, really think about and look at, oh, this video game, I die 10 times in an hour and I
Yeah.
have to progress. Like I'm playing Call of Duty, I'm playing Hades, whatever the game may be, and it's like that is a reality. Or the TV shows, even comedies,
Yeah.
sitcoms, whatever the case is, actually look at how many times the theme of death and grief come about, whether it is through someone actually dying or if it's a marriage or if someone's getting a divorce. There's grief in all of those moments. And we often are unable or don't actually recognize that, oh, I need to label this as grief.
Yeah.
So through the podcast, through everything I do, just really highlighting like grief is not just one thing, it is so many things wrapped into this label.
And something I know on both times I've been on your podcast, we've talked about my daughter. I have an 8-year old,
Yeah.
and just how I explain certain things to her, especially given the fact that like she hears me talking about work all the time. But I always think of when you hear like about a family moving away, right, with young kids, and you see it on TV or you see it in your real life where parents say, "Don't worry, you'll make other friends." And yeah, I mean, that statement's
Mm,
probably true. But the thing that always throws me is like your kids are grieving. You're taking them away from
yes.
their friends, which aren't just friends at that, nice, pleasant level, but like they are defining the social human beings that your children will be in certain ways. And you're taking them away from that.
Yes.
You're literally cutting them off from those people. And although we have technology on our side nowadays, usually an under 10-year-old isn't like just picking up the phone and like FaceTiming their bestie. Like it's usually a slightly more older thing. So I always think of that. And my daughter, she'll be in the same school next year, but she's going to be moving into the gifted stream. And so she won't be with her best friends anymore.
Yeah.
And although they're just in different classes, which could have happened at any time, like she will stay in a stream with the same kids like throughout the rest of elementary school. And she talks about how big of a transition that will be for her. And although her friends are nearby, like there's going to be all these new people around. And like I realized the other day, like she's kind of describing grief to me in her own 8-year
Yes.
old way and what that will be like. And I think that it's those moments where we have opportunities as members of older generations to teach our kids about grief without saying you're grieving, but like actually really lay it out to them so that then when much more traumatic things happen, as they inevitably will in their life, where grief is a word that then gets said, you're able to like connect it to these fundamental building block moments of their
Yes.
childhood as well. It's something I think that our generation has the ability to do, and we could really transform the way these kids, what are they, Generation Alpha now, like the way that they process everything in life by showing them that it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to
Yes.
express that that's what's happening to you as well.
Yeah. And just recognizing that this is a transition, as you said,
Yeah.
this is a process, and
Mm-hmm.
things are going to come up in life where things are going to happen and you may not have anticipated it.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to recognize, okay, this is a change, this is different. Let me lean into it, let me navigate it differently. It's part of the process.
Exactly. And that really leads sort of
Yeah.
into our next question. I mean, when we're talking about topics like aging, end of life, grief, how do you think that helps us to prepare to cope with difficult moments, any sort of difficult moment down the road? And do you think that when you're at a certain age, that whole saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, do you think that we can teach older generations of people to be more accepting of these topics?
I 100% believe that you can. I was speaking with somebody recently on soft skills. They're a coach, trainer,
Yeah.
workshop practitioner, everything. And they said that these are things that you can actually teach.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are not things like that you have to assume that people automatically know or just innately attuned
Yeah.
to. These are skills that you can teach. Like it's very much that way. And I would say that when it comes to navigating the conversation around death and dying, I'd imagine if you say to yourself, I'm going to tell my best friend, I'm going to tell my family members what I want done to my body,
Mm-hmm.
having the conversation of what's going to happen to finances, or what's going to happen in this business conversation, or what do you want like for dinner, like the challenging conversations that happen sometimes in families.
Yeah.
They're just easier. Like if I can talk about what's going to happen to my body, having the conversation around finances for a business, for with your business partner or anything like that, it'll be so much easier. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just lessens the intensity of what takes place.
I completely agree with you. I think that all the
Yeah.
time when I think about talking to my daughter about these things, and eventually one day I will have, I guess I can say this on instrument, I'll have the sex talk with her. And how do I broach that? And what's interesting is we have talked more about it getting old and dying than we have the creation of life. And eventually we will have that conversation. And I feel like we've been able to just establish a communication pattern around challenging topics, even at that age.
Yeah.
And I see that with clients that I work with, where sometimes they just have done a really exceptional job of avoiding talking about anything serious,
It's
anything at all.
impressive,
It's
right? Yeah.
really impressive how people do this. But I also see it in my own family, and maybe you see it in yours, right? I mean, your family was touched by death. You think that they'd be comfortable talking about it, but maybe they're not, right? Maybe, if anything, it forces them to avoid it even more because they felt the sting of that. They felt that pain. My family, there's certain topics that they will go into and then certain not. I mean, I have four parents. My parents were divorced and remarried, and then I have my in-laws. And I changed the way I communicate with each set of those parents. I figured out what we can talk about, what we can't talk about, what will upset them,
Yeah.
what won't, what buttons I want to push, what ones I don't want to, right? But it's really incredible how good of a job people have done of avoiding talking about anything that could cause disagreement or anything negative within their family.
I view this conversation as when we fundamentally shift how we view death, we will fundamentally shift how we view life.
Mhm.
And the polarization, the arguments that take place on certain topics, we'll be able to look at that and really think, oh, we can actually have a
Yeah.
conversation. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this way. And it'll even shift like how we work, where we work, who we connect with, how we live life.
Yeah.
Because I view life and death kind of like a
Yeah.
coin. And one side is life, one side is death. And they're always going to be intertwined no matter what. It's your relationship with
Mhm.
it and how you navigate it that like defines everything.
Exactly. Now let's shift over to something that I think some people would find surprising. So you do a lot of work with organizations and people in the workplace. Now, as I said, that could be really surprising to people who feel like grief and talking about getting old, talking about dying, like these are really personal topics that shouldn't be brought into a workplace. So why do you think it's important to bring these conversations into professional spaces and to help management teams to be able to speak on these topics, support their employees and more?
Do you know how many hours an average person spends at work in their lifetime? Like
No, do
it,
you know? I
it
don't.
is
I'm
it
sure it's
is
a lot.
almost it is almost 100,000 hours
My God,
of
that's
your
gross.
time spent. I know, right?
Yeah.
And that is one third of your life.
Yeah.
Like all things being equal, that is a third of your life spent in the workforce, in the workplace. So the idea that you have to go through
Mm.
such a large section of your daily life not having to talk about this, having to compartmentalize. If you're going through a divorce, if your child is moving away, you're an empty nester now.
Mm.
If your kids got married, if you yourself are getting married and you have to move cities,
Yeah.
or if you are going through
Hmm.
layoffs with your company, or if your best friend at work got laid off, or if you got promoted, now you're similar to your daughter. The people that you're close to are changing. There's
Hmm.
grief. There's like micro moments of grief in all of those situations.
Yeah.
So we need to have these discussions. We need to enhance the way that we perceive bereavement policies. Like when you're able to take the time away just to process, just
Hmm.
not even do the financials if it comes to a death, but the actual like processing of, oh, my life is going to change. How do
Yeah.
I navigate that? What ways do I need to navigate that?
Hmm.
And it's super important to have these conversations in the workplace, to do the trainings. Again, you can teach these soft skills. You can teach how to have these discussions
Hmm.
with your team leaders, with your employees, from the executive level down. You need to have these conversations because you're spending so much time at work. Don't you
Hmm.
want to be comfortable? Don't you want to be able to come up as yourself, like show up how you want to show up? I know
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I would, but some places
100%.
like, yeah,
It's it's really too bad that there's so much resistance. I see it a lot in older companies. In the younger ones that are coming out now, companies founded by millennials, I've definitely noticed more things. My husband's worked for a couple startups, and it's been interesting to see their bereavement policies. I mean, you even just see it in like personal days, the fact that personal days are so flexible now, the idea that there's more,
yeah,
I guess, trust in employees. And I remember I had one of the people who worked for me reach out and oh, I'm forgetting who it was, a cat or a dog. One of her pets died. I'm forgetting. And she said it was very surprising. And she's like, do you mind if I take the day? And I'm like, take the week. Like, do what you have to do. Because if she is suffering, like just strictly from a business standpoint, just putting that hat on, she's not going to do a good job at her job. She's just
yeah.
not. Like, I take mental health days. I'm the boss, so it's pretty easy for me to do it. But like, I do. So why wouldn't I expect my employees to do the same thing? Why wouldn't I expect, some of the people who work for me are still in school, they're still doing other things. Why wouldn't I expect that if they have this massive assignment due that I wouldn't just give them time to work on that? So if something traumatic happens to them, why wouldn't I give them time off and give them the ability to put time and energy into that so that then they can
Yes.
come back when they're like, yes, I need something to distract me, keep my hands busy, not be thinking about this thing that happened all the time. And then they have the brain power to actually invest into the work that they're doing for you. So I think it's wonderful that you've sort of moved into that area as well, into that space, and that you're supporting different industries, different professionals to allow for this to happen and to give their employees some grace and some time, and also to make it a safe space to have these conversations while at work.
Yeah. And it's even recognizing the fact that the loss of productivity is going to impact
Yeah.
like the outcome, right? So giving them the support that they need to be able to come back with the energy that
Mm,
they can do the work is so paramount. And also a lot of folks, it's like, okay, you get your 1 week unpaid, paid, whatever the case
yeah.
may be, and they come back, and of course they're going to be either slower or like distracted or whatever the case. And so many times I've seen layoffs happen. I've seen
Yeah.
people let go because they're not back to how they were before,
Mm-hmm.
their life before. And it's like their life has changed. You need
Yeah.
to catch up with the fact that it's changed. And from like a monetary perspective, there's so much cost sunk into hiring a new person,
Yep.
training a new person, onboarding. And that's the forward thinking that a lot of organizations uh, don't necessarily recognize in the moment. They're very much like, what's happening today?
Yeah.
I need to think about what's happening today, not 6 months from now. So just keep that in mind. Like long term, this is going to be better for the organization and also the individual.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. The last thing that that person needs after going and burying their mother is to get laid off from work. Like, talk about just, just
Just
make it
layering
like,
on the
yeah, just
trauma.
keep
Like,
going. Just keep going. I know. Like, it's so very true. Now we are kind of getting to the end of our time here. You've had a couple episodes come out this season for Philotimo Life. I was one of them. No pressure for anyone to listen to mine. But who do you have coming up, or what topics do you have coming up that people can get excited about?
so we're wrapping up our partnership with the Legacy Expo with the next few episodes that are coming out. I can't share too much, but we have a new episode coming out tomorrow if you want
Nice.
to give it a listen. And after this season, we're really going to be focusing on doing more of those media focused episodes. So really looking at video games and movies, those types of storytelling, just to really showcase like death is being shown everywhere, and we kind of have to lean into it.
Mhm.
So folks can really look forward to that in the next few months.
That's awesome. So, is there anything else that you want to share? You could let people know how they could find you if they have topic ideas or conversations they want to have with you. Please share right
Yeah.
now.
The last thing I want to share is a reminder that grief is and can be so transformational depending on how you lean into it. It can change how you build and create systems in your life and in the world. So just really recognizing that grief is such a transformational thing in everybody's life. And I just encourage you to lean into the conversations, whether it's going to a death cafe or coming to one of the morning lattes that I host once a month and just having that conversation either with strangers or friends and family members and just leaning into it. And if you're interested in reaching out, please give me an email. You can contact us at info at philotimolife.com. There's a lot of apps and infos in that sentence. But yeah, shoot us an email. I'd love to hear from you and see how I can collaborate and work with you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Maria. Twice this year, maybe next year, we're going to have to come back and keep expanding on these topics that we love to talk about. But thank you so much for taking the time and speaking to our Viive audience. And I think I'm going to be seeing you in a couple weeks at another event.
Yeah.
I'm excited. More in-person time.
Amazing. We'll be booth buddies again. So
Yes, I love it. I love it. Awesome. Thanks so much, Maria. And
thank
everyone, stay
you.
tuned. We'll see you in a month for our third episode. Really excited for another awesome guest. Bye, everybody.
See you.